Bread, one of the most tasty and miraculous inventions humans have ever made.
Just a shame we're not making it today. I've got more than one buddy this time. I've got two, although she's eating. Okay, today we are going to be making gluten-free bread. If you remember my last gluten-free video, I said that we would put these 3 flours to the test and see which one made the best bread. Now last time, Namaste came out on top as obviously one of my favorite breads, and actually the price has dropped since, and the 5-pound bag has become available online. On top of that, Pillsbury came out dead last. I haven't even looked at the price because I never want to see this thing again. This is your last chance to redeem yourself. And then King Arthur is like middle of the road. I mean, if you find it, great. Unlike last time though, I actually have a recipe that Pillsbury has on their website. Now last time, each one of these I did one recipe from their website and then put them to the test in a singular regular gluten recipe and a gluten-free recipe and see how they perform. I'm not gonna do that this time because 1, the video was really long and stuck to edit, and 2, it's bread. You're not gonna be able to use gluten-free flour in a regular bread recipe. Gluten is just so important to bread that you have to have a specialized recipe for it. And recipes that call for generic, just, oh, any gluten-free flour. No, I have learned, do not trust those recipes. However, I am going to be testing their recipe against the recipe I've been using for a while. So, this is the recipe I've been using. I like it a lot because it just uses millet, flour, tapioca starch, and you basically make your own flour blend. I'm gonna be doing 2 today and 2 tomorrow, so I'm not gonna be tasting them all fresh at the same time because, just like with bowls, we don't have more than 2 of one type of pan. All of the recipes today can be found on their websites, but I'll also link all the ones I use in the description down below. For Namaste, we have Granny's gluten-free oven baked bread, and we've got this home style white bread recipe for Pillsbury. And for King Arthur, technically I should use this one because it's a generic sandwich bread. I think I made this before years ago and it was awful. It might not have been this one. There were several on their website, but either way, that's all the flour I have left, so I don't want to use it all on that because then I wouldn't have enough to make honey oat. Anyways, for this first day, I'm going to be making my regular sandwich bread and pairing it against Namaste. And they're both just generic bread. They're not falling into a category. Meanwhile, these are trying to be white bread and honey oat. Anyways, we are going to start with the sandwich bread because it takes longer to rise, that's really it. Now the first thing we need to do is whisk 3/4 cups of water with 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. You don't want your water to be too hot, otherwise it will kill the yeast, but you also don't want it to be too cold or else the yeast won't really bloom because it needs some heat. Typically something about body temperature or a little bit warmer is perfect. All right, now that's all combined, we are going to set it off to the side while we get our dry ingredients together. So in our large bowl, we are going to add 1 1/2 cups of millet flour, 1 cup of tapioca starch, 2 teaspoons of xanthan gum, 1 teaspoon table salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And then just whisk it all up to combine it. If you're wondering why I didn't put the granulated sugar in, that's because I'm not using sugar. I am going to be using honey instead. But now that is all of our dry ingredients. So we're going to add in our yeast and water mixture. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're distracting me. What are you doing? And then we are going to whisk up our 3 eggs. Why do I always have such a hard time with this as soon as the camera is rolling? And I'm going to mix in my 2 tablespoons of honey with the eggs so that way it combines better in the mixture. Okay, I have a thought every time I do this. I wonder, for real, how good honey scrambled eggs would taste. Is that a weird thought? I feel like that'd both be delicious and disgusting. And now add that to the rest of our ingredients. And then the last things we need to add are 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. And now all that's left is to mix it all up. This says to technically use like a stand mixer and do all the, and you know, I tried doing this with a hand mixer, but the batter is just way too thick for that. And on top of that, it's quite easy to just hand mix all of this. And if you're wondering, it is supposed to be this consistency, this thick kind of elasticy cake batterish consistency. It's not going to be a ball. Gluten-free bread making is very different from regular bread making. And of course, you don't need to knead it because there's no gluten to develop. Now I've prepared my loaf dish. I went ahead and greased it and I lined the bottom with parchment paper. If you don't do this, you're never gonna get it out. I'm just saying. At least not without destroying it. Now just spread it out nice and evenly. And that's about as smooth as it's going to get. And so now I'm just gonna top it loosely with some plastic wrap that has also been greased. If you don't do this, yeah, this batter's so sticky that it'll stick to it, but I also don't want to like put it too tight that the thing can't push against it and rise, so just kind of loosely set it on there. And now you want to put this in a warm place to rise, and because it's, you know, so cold, I just turn the oven on for a minute, and oh, there's still a pan of water in there, okay. And I'm just gonna let this sit here to rise for about an hour or until it's doubled in size. Also, baking tip. Wash this stuff up right away because it will turn to concrete. Now for our next loaf, the recipe for this is actually pretty similar to the other ones. You know, it's got the honey, salt, 3 eggs too, yeast, water, obviously. The only real difference is this one has milk and of course uses the flour blend. So anyways, as with any recipe with bread, you want to start with the yeast. So we're going to mix a tablespoon of yeast with a 1/4 cup of warm water. Did you get your paw stuck? You stuck? Hold on, stay still, hold on. Why did you stick your foot in there? Hold on, don't hiss at me. You're the one that stuck your foot in there. Can it be pulled down or, no, you put your claws up. Okay, let's lift up and out. There we go. Now don't stick your foot in the dishwasher. Maybe now you'll learn your lesson. Yeah, don't get your foot stuck. Ow, hey, I helped you. It's not the way to thank someone that helped you. Ah ha 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 ha. I gotta be honest, I've read through this next part of instructions several times and I'm still not certain I understand it. The wording is very weird. The best I can figure is we take 1.5 cups of milk and warm it on the stove. There, warm on my filthy stove. The light hits and you see all the cat hair. Milk is now warm, maybe too warm, I don't know. So okay, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of oil, 2 tablespoons of honey, and 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Look, he needs some comfort. That paw in the dishwasher was very traumatizing. You know his favorite thing to do in the morning is? Aurora borealis, at this time of year, of this time of day, localized entirely within this kitchen? I'm going to assume now that we've added this stuff, we're gonna wanna mix it up. And next, it wants us to dirty another bowl by taking the 3 eggs and beating them. I got a good egg rack on camera! See, I can crack eggs one-handed. It's not just, it's the recording curse. Oh my god, I did all 3. Oh my god, look how little mess there is. Holy cow. Maybe I let myself get a little too excited with that because this is kind of a small bowl to mix 3 eggs in, but okay, and now we are to add the eggs to the milk mixture. And this is cooled down a little bit, so it's not too hot. Not that it should be hot. It doesn't say to stir, but I'm going to anyways. You know, couldn't I like technically just like mix the eggs in here? Do I have to like pre-beat them before putting them in here? I don't know. I feel like I should be able to. And now I want us to add the yeast mixture in with this, which this yeast is maybe a little overly bloomed. Look at that. That is beyond frothy. Okay, pour it all in. And it says to use a whisk or a hand blender on medium, which, why would you use a hand blender? This is so thin. It's not like there's lumps or anything. You wouldn't need to dirty a hand blender. You know, this can go in the dishwasher. A hand blender can't. Well, that looks real nice. Okay, so now we can set that aside. Now it's time to get our dry ingredients. So in the bowl, we need to add in 3.5 cups of the flour blend, 1/2 cup of starch, I'm using tapioca, and 1 teaspoon of salt. And now I'm just gonna give this a tiny stir up, and then add our liquid ingredients to our dry. And now it says to take an electric mixer and beat on medium for 3 minutes. So you can tell how far I read ahead by how prepared I am. Do I have flour on my lens? I have flour on my lens. Actually, my entire camera is covered with flour now that I take a look at it. Whoops. Now this thing is really heavy, so I'm going to, you know, Ember, you're not gonna be able to be in this. Okay, I don't know how well this is actually going to work. This is the exact same issue that I have with the other recipe. If I use a mixer on it, it climbs up the beaters. Let's just try and get the rest of the 3 minutes done, I guess. All right, I think it's time for the patent pending dough hooks to come back. Okay, 3 minutes. Gluten-free dough doesn't need to be kneaded. It doesn't need to be kneaded. So why am I doing this? I think we're good. 3 minutes. calling it. This is too thick for a hand mixer. That's for sure. You might get away with it with a stand mixer, but they literally say handheld electric mixer. This is not a handheld electric mixer recipe, I'll tell you that. Okay, next step. So next it's telling me to pour it into a well-greased loaf pan. And to be honest, this looks like a lot of batter. There is more here than there was with the other one, but there's also instructions to make free-form bread. So I'm thinking maybe make half of it in the loaf pan and then the other half I can make as like free-form and just compare, because I didn't notice this until now. It does say like for free-form, you heavily oil your bowl for it to rise and then you wet your hands and shape it. You know what? I'm just gonna let it rise on the pan. That's what I do with every other recipe, so that's what I'm just gonna do here. I guess I'll make the free-form one a little bit smaller. That was supposed to be a little bit smaller, but I think they might be about the same size. Okay, now let's shape this into a happy little loaf. All right, we've got our loaf, and then we've got our free-form. And it says to cover these with the greased plastic wrap too. And it also wants a bread cloth for some reason. I thought this one was bigger, but you know, I think it can suffice for both. Okay. My original plan was to get that done in a half hour and then put them both in the oven to rise, but as you can see, the time we set for an hour, this is like ready to bake. These are going to have to rise in the toaster oven. Just gonna get that going on warm. Since it is done rising and it rose pretty nicely, I'm just gonna leave it in here while it's preheating, and for me it takes 50 minutes, but it might take a little longer. If it's browning too quickly and it's not done, go ahead and put some foil over the top. And if you don't know when bread is done, here is something you probably haven't heard. Check its temperature. You do not want to be eating live yeast, so it is important that the temperature of the bread comes up, and the one listed in this recipe is about 210. So now, we wait. So it's technically only supposed to let these rise for 30 minutes, but there weren't instructions to say are they supposed to double their size or anything, but these rose pretty nicely. And it's time for this to come out. Although for this loaf, we're not quite done yet. Very important for gluten-free bread to not let it cool in the dish. That is because gluten-free bread contains xanthan gum. The xanthan gum and starch will absorb the moisture from the steam, turning the bread soggy if you leave it to cool in the pan. Let it cool in the dish for like 3 minutes and then transfer it to a wire rack and let it cool completely before slicing it. Now the instructions for these say to loosely tint them with some aluminum foil, and these bake at the same temperature as the other bread. So I'm just gonna slide this into the oven at 350, and it says to cook them tented for 30 minutes and then we're gonna remove it. These are kind of smaller loaves. It's been almost a half hour. So they're supposed to go for like another 35 to 45 minutes after you remove the foil. Now to wait another half hour. So the recipe doesn't actually say how brown it's supposed to be. So I went ahead and I stuck a thermometer in there. That's a grill safe thermometer, so it's okay to be in the oven, I think. Well, looky who showed up. Do you want some bread, boy? In case I'm following my Twitter, that's Bunker. I'll feed him after I get the bread out. What I don't like about this is it doesn't say the exact temperature. It just, yeah, okay. And I can pull this out and, ooh, it looks awfully dirty. You know, we'll see. I can always throw it back in the oven. Okay, time to feed a cat. Hi, Bunk. Are you hungry? That's a lot of food for you, but it's okay. Oh my goodness. Well, it's too cold to be hungry out here. Okay, you enjoy. I'll see you later, buddy. All right, once again, just a little 1-2 flop. You know, I was half worried I wouldn't be able to tell these two loaves apart. You know, I think I can tell them apart. Now, technically, these should be much cooler before cutting into them, but you know what? I don't care. I'm hungry, so I'm gonna cut into this one first. They're the regular bread recipe I make. It makes good breadcrumbs, makes good French toast, makes good garlic bread and cheese sandwiches. Peanut butter sandwiches? No. Good, I have nothing to complain about. I think I'll cut into the freeform loaf on this one. Because if this is good, you bet I'm not gonna dirty a pan like that. Now this one's hot because it hasn't been sitting on the counter for 2 hours. It's a little sticky, so it might not be fully done, but it's cooked, so that is not fully done. But it's like even gummy all the way at the edges, not just the middle, so it tastes like it needs more salt. Okay, time to preheat the oven again. Okay, so I gave it another like 15 minutes, and I used the foil to keep it from getting too thick of a crust on top. Yeah, that's still gummy, as you can see. So I'm kind of glad this happened on camera. Kind of not, because I really wanted this to work. But there's a bit of an issue with this flour, I noticed, where it's very finicky to oil. Oftentimes I find you should use less oil than the recipe calls for because otherwise it's gonna leave this kind of raw texture. Definitely does not beat out my recipe because my recipe is not finicky. Anyways, for this next recipe, we are going to be doing the King Arthur. Although with this recipe, I am going to be making half a batch, and the reason I'm doing that is because I finally looked at the ingredients, and you know, I don't want to put 4 eggs in this. I've used so many eggs. I've gone through like almost a dozen eggs in the past day. Let's chill it all the eggs. I'm just gonna be reading off the full quantities and pointing in half, so yeah, just keep that in mind. First thing I wanted to do is put 3 cups of the flour, half a cup of rolled oats, 1/2 teaspoon yeast, and 1 teaspoon of salt into a bowl. Once again, in a bowl of a stand mixer. Why does everyone assume that literally everyone has a stand mixer? Okay, well, that's mixed. Now for the next step, it wants us to whisk together 3/4 cup of warm milk and 2 tablespoons of honey. You know, this seems like very little honey for a bread that's called honey oat. Next, it wants us to add the wet into the dry with a hand mixer, beating all the time. It puts in mixture will be crumbly. Why do they all want you to use a hand mixer and stuff that's so thick? Okay, let's go along with this. Okay, so I think that's good. And next, it just wants me to blend in 4 tablespoons of butter. That might not be the most well mixed, but it's okay because we're not done. I've already made a mess in my kitchen. And then now it wants me to add in eggs, 1 at a time, mixing well in between. Now it wants me to scrape the bottom and sides of the bowl, which I mean, this is pretty well combined. And then once again, we're gonna beat at medium speed for 3 minutes. The next step is just to put it into a greased loaf pan and cover it with plastic. We've seen this all before. Yeah, this didn't really make that much, but I really did not want to put 4 eggs into it. Now it says to use your damp fingers or a spatula to push the bread up into a loaf shape. So I'm just gonna try and do something a little loose, loafy. And it doesn't say to do this in the recipe, but I'm gonna take a little bit of liberty here and just sprinkle the top with fresh oats to give it the more oaty look. I just figured honey oat bread should look kind of like honey oat bread, but that's just me. And now into a warm place to rise. And this says it could take 30 to 60 minutes, but I want to give some props to them over what Namaste did. They tell you to let it rise until a loaf barely crowns above the rim of the 8 by 1/2 inch by 4.5 pan, or comes to 3/4 inch of the rim of a 9 by 4 pan. They tell you how much it's supposed to rise! Better instructions! Yeah, there's a lot more to read, but there's a reason for that, but it's complicated. Although speaking of complicated, it's time to go back to a very non-complicated recipe. Look at these directions, there's like nothing here. Also, I have to say, I love how recipes that have you making bread list the first step as preheating the oven, and then later on they say, let it rise for 30 minutes. You're gonna have your oven running for like an hour with nothing in it. Just weird. Okay, let's make this. This is your last chance. If this bread does not turn out even slightly good, this and the unopened bag I have is going straight in the garbage. This is a very, very minimal recipe, so this should only take a few minutes, thank God. So our first step is in a bowl to combine 1.5 cups of the flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of yeast, and 1 teaspoon of salt. And that's like half of the ingredients. The counter looks clean now. I'm just gonna stir it a little bit, because I guess that's what I should do. So for the next step, it wants us to beat in 1 cup of warm milk. Hold on, I just noticed the temperature. 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't yeast die at like 125? Hold on. What temperature does yeast die?
140 degrees Fahrenheit. According to Bob's Red Mill, regardless of the type of yeast you use, if your water reaches temperatures of 120 degrees Fahrenheit or more, the yeast will begin to die off. Once water temps reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, that is the point where the yeast will be completely killed off.
Okay, so I'm not incorrect in that. You do not want it to be that hot. Who wrote this? Who wrote this? Well, anyways, calming down. It wants us to beat 1 cup of warm milk into the dry ingredients with an electric mixer. It says to do this at medium speed. This is a lot of milk. Oh, this is gonna be soupy. Wow, not as soupy as I thought. Okay, this is crumbs. And now it wants us to add 2 eggs and a 1/4 cup of melted butter. Once again with the timer, it wants us to beat for 2 minutes until smooth. This is so thick, but it's already smooth. Oh god, it's on my hands. It's everywhere. It's all over the floor, the counter. You were spared, Ember. And now it wants us to cover the bowl and let it rest for 10 minutes. And now we wait. Now it wants us to uncover the dough. Look at that, it actually did rise. It kind of has like a bready texture. It wants us to give it a stir, so I guess deflate it, kind of. And then put into the prepared loaf pan. And again, cover it. It doesn't say what, I'm just doing the same thing. And let it rise for 30 minutes. No telling if it's supposed to double in size or anything. Just cover and let rise. So in you go with the honey oat, which actually might be getting close to ready to bake. These are both rising pretty nicely, but I think it's time to bake this. It might actually be a little over risen. So I'm going to peel this off and put it in the big oven here, which has been preheated for once to 350. And the recipe says that it can take between 40 and 50 minutes to bake, but since it's smaller, I'm gonna put it in for 30 and keep an eye on it. I think this is ready to bake now. It looks very well risen and it bakes at the same temperature, so I'm just going to slide it in here. And it says for 40 to 42 minutes, but we'll see. I think it's been about like 40 minutes roughly. This has gotten dark-ish and the temperature is supposed to read at about 200. Why do these things take so long? They're so slow. Well, you know, I'm gonna say that's done. The nice thing about the parchment is you can just kind of lift it up and slide it off. Let that cool while the other one cooks, and then we'll give them a try once this one comes out. And I believe this one is probably done. It says to take out when golden, and I would say that looks nice and golden. That actually looks pretty good, and you know what? It smells pretty good too. I'm surprised. I'd say they had sufficient time to cool, and I am ready to eat some bread. I have been thinking about this honey oat for like a week, so I have to try it first. I have got to try it first. It looks to have a pretty good texture. I mean, that's bread, all right. It doesn't fully have the honey oat taste. I really can't taste the honey, which, I mean, there's hardly any in here. The texture is really good. And so was the taste. I really like this. Holy cow, this is really good. All right, Pillsbury. This one's still a little bit warm, but it should be good. This is pretty moist. I don't know if I'd call it gummy, but it's moist. Maybe I should preface this by saying I'm not a big fan of white bread. This is just bland. It has a weird aftertaste. I think I've had enough. It's not awful like the other recipes that I made with this flour were, but it's grainy. It has this weird aftertaste. I think that might be like the pea protein or whatnot they put in there. It definitely needs like some type of acidity. It's not very good is what I'm saying. To be honest, the King Arthur definitely won this. There's no competition. I think this might be better than my regular bread recipe, and you bet I am going to eat this. I actually think it might be really good with like some cinnamon sugar toast. I think I might make that. This, I don't even think I'm going to try and turn into breadcrumbs. And with that, we finally finished these gluten-free flour testings. So, what have we learned from all of this? Well, the first thing we've learned is that Pillsbury sucks. But, actual knowledge aside, in the first round, we saw Namaste and King Arthur go blow for blow basically on everything. Namaste edged out a little bit ahead, and then in this one, obviously, King Arthur really took it home with their honey oat. It doesn't taste a whole lot like honey oat, but it's so good. That being said, it's like their only recipe that I would consider like actually really delicious that I have tried. Though if I had to pick a favorite flour out of the ones that I tested, I would have to go with the Namaste. I'm not even joking when I say a good portion of my gluten-free cookbook is their recipes. This pie crust, oh my god. And like, y'all, flaky biscuits that practically melt in your mouth? Yes? And I want to add, I did try making their bread a second time. I did what I said I was going to do. I cut down on the oil, and I actually increased the apple cider vinegar and salt, and that really helped the flavor. The loaf still ended up completely raw in the middle, and I made it into croutons again. I did notice something when I looked at the recipe though. They have a bread machine recipe, and their bread machine recipe does not use the extra 1/4 cup of water. So this makes me come to the conclusion it's not just oil that the dough is sensitive to, it's also liquid. Their flour absorbs water and doesn't want to let go of it, so you have to be careful that your mixture is not too wet. That being said, if you want a flour that's just gonna work okay, and I'm sure you could probably swap it out in these recipes. Honestly, this is one of the top brands, and for good reason. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm the real winner here because I have a whole lot of bread to eat. Oh my god, I love bread. I love bread so much. And by the way, remember, freeze gluten-free stuff. Don't let gluten-free bread sit out for several days like regular bread because this stuff dries out so unbelievably fast. I can't have it frozen if you don't like it. As for this, I doubt even the raccoons will want the ow! Oh, it was so frozen. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm scared. I'm sorry, boy. I'm sorry. What a waste of perfectly good ingredients. Anyways, thanks for watching these really long videos. I hope you've enjoyed them, and I will see you in the next one later. Oh my god, I think I actually punted open the bag. Oh my god. Well, that's fine, because this is where you belong.